Welcome everyone to the seminar series hosted by the Australian Citizen Science Association's Early and Mid-Career Researcher Working Group. My name is Pat Bonney. I'm coming to you from Lake Tyers in East Gippsland, which is the traditional lands of the Gunai-Kurnai people. I acknowledge the Gunai-Kurnai as the traditional owners of this land and waters of this country, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And it's great to see some familiar faces here today, but for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the seminar series. Feel free to use the chat, introduce yourselves, let us know where you're coming from today. About these seminar series, they were initially set up to provide a space for citizen science researchers to share their research with others. And so far we've heard from some fantastic researchers looking into relationships between citizen science and environmental policy, genomics research, digital technologies, and environmental activism as well. And so just a general structure for today too. So we'll hear from our presenter, Anna Christie, who's going to be speaking about the challenges and opportunities of citizen science monitoring of coal mines and gas fields. This will be followed by a Q&A about Anna's research. So please drop in your questions into the chat and we'll be sure to relay those to Anna at the end of the presentation. And following this Q&A, we'd like to open up the conversation in a group discussion, which will be hosted by my colleague and collaborator on this seminar series, Dr. Yaela Golumbik. So with that short introduction, I'd like to introduce Anna Christie. Anna is studying a PhD in science and law at Western Sydney University. She's previously worked in the public and private sectors in environmental projects around developing and establishing green waste and chemical collection systems. She also lectures in environmental communications and environmental values and ethics at Australian Catholic University, and is also involved in a range of different projects at University of Sydney, University of New South Wales, and the University of Technology, Sydney's Institute of Sustainable Futures. Since 2014, Anna has conducted tours of the Leard and Pilliga, I hope I'm getting that right, Pilliga forests, connecting visitors and students with these inland forests and raising awareness of the impacts of coal and coal seam gas mining. So thanks for coming again. Looking forward to this presentation, and I'd like to hand it over to Anna to present today. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Pat, and I hope you can see and hear me okay. Am I coming through okay to you, Pat?
Yes, Anna, that's all good.
Good, excellent. Well, thanks everyone for coming along today, and this is the culmination of several years of hard work, and it's not my work. This is a collective that has come together in the northwest of New South Wales, and we operate on the land of the Gomeroi, also known as the Gamilaroi, and this area is known as the Namoi River Valley to some. To others, it's known as the Surat Basin. That's the geological name, which some people prefer to call it, to bring attention to the incredible amount of fossil fuels that lies beneath the ground. We prefer to keep attention on the River Valley side of it because that's the water, and that's one of the hugest concerns that exists today in relation to the incoming heavy industry from coal and gas. So I wish to offer my respects to the Gomeroi people. They continue to fight to protect their ancestral lands. And this battle is going on today against multi-billion-dollar companies who seek to come into these greenfield areas and to divide and conquer so that they can gain what they think is a form of social license to conduct this kind of industry there. The Leard Forest Research Node was established in 2015 following the expansion of the Boggabri coal mine and the commencement of the Maules Creek coal mine in the Leard Forest. We are not associated with a particular university, and we are a collective. We're a node. We we operate according to some procedures and transparent sharing of information wherever possible, but we have been fairly organic in our establishment. So what I thought I'd do is, before we go into more details about the risks and the opportunities, I'm going to show a slideshow. I'm going to put up my slideshow now, and I hope that that is clear to everyone to have a look. This is our little logo. When we originally started, we were concerned that there wasn't enough attention being paid on evidence. There was a highly conflicted situation going on in the area of the Leard Forest, and citizen science has now become a necessary form of community action when confronted with coal and gas extraction. And with the advent of mega coal mines like Maules Creek and a proliferation of other coal mines, both open cut and underground, it's exposed residents to ongoing environmental impacts and loss of amenity, potential health concerns due to excessive pollution. Here's a list of the coal mines that we've got in the area. And in fact, I've got a map here that shows them to you. But look, we've got the Narrabri underground mine, Maules Creek mine, that's a 13 million tonnes per annum. Boggabri mine, so that's the only coal mine that's not owned and operated by Whitehaven. Tarrawonga, Rockglen and Vickery. We've also got on the doorstep the Narrabri gas project, which has been approved, and we've also got pending, announced only a matter of weeks ago, that the New South Wales government is opening up more areas of New South Wales for gas exploration, and incredibly, they're opening up the Liverpool Plains, which is said to be some of the most, not only the most fertile land in Australia, but even recognised internationally as being of high fertility. And this is our food bowl. Now, just to show you where the area is that we're looking at, if you look on the map, you'll see a red area, and that's the Namoi River catchment. Here, don't know if you can see, but here we've got the Narrabri gas project over to the southwest of Narrabri. Here's the Narrabri town. I'm just using my cursor to show people if you can see where that is. We've got here the Narrabri underground mine, just near the Kamilaroi Highway, Maules Creek, Mega Mine, Boggabri, Tarrawonga. These three are referred to as, well, they originally were referred to as the Leard Mining Precinct, but now they ditched that name because there's a move towards like not actually talking about the lead. Even Google Earth got rid of the label Leard Forest, which we don't know how that happened. They now call it the BTM mine complex. So you see how language can play a role. It went from being the Leard Forest to now being called the BTM mine complex. Here we have the Vickery mine. This one is currently the subject of a federal court legal action by a number of young Australians who took the federal Environment Minister, Susan Ley, to court, claiming that she breached her duty of care to basically to people who will be alive in the second half of this century. And they said that she has breached her duty of care by giving, if she gives approval to the Vickery mine. And now we've got two other smaller mines there as well. Down here at the bottom is Werris Creek, another highly problematic mine operated by Whitehaven Coal. Here, I just wanted to give you a look at the diagram of this is the gas fields. Now, this dark area here is what is now known to be the extent of Santos's stage 1 and probably stage 2. If they get it, if they go ahead. I'll flick back to show you where that is. So that gas field map, it kind of goes sort of around this area down to Quirindi, which is very, very worrying to the people concerned, many of whom rely on the Great Artesian Basin for water, for agriculture, and the risks that are known from coal seam gas and from the toxic salts that are distributed all around the place are two of the most compelling concerns for landowners and town dwellers as well. So what are our objectives? What were our objectives when we started? Well, this is what they were. We wanted to ground truth the impacts of coal mines and gas industry, which usually you hear about them in the form of an environmental impact assessment. And this has been conducted by experts, and you see it in black and white, but you never have any community participation in the gathering of that information. So ground truthing it was important. Identifying impacts that are not captured in the environmental impact assessment, that's emerged to be one of the really important contributions that citizen science can make. As we see environmental impact assessment being narrowed down progressively, not only the scope, but also the methodology. We also announced when we first launched the Leard Forest Research Node that we saw our role as supporting regulators in their role. Now, some people, some academics and scholars have referred to this as a surrogate regulator role. And I don't go so far as to use that expression. And I'm sure that many regulators would be quite offended, and probably it's improper, but it is a term that's in common usage now in the surrogate regulator. And to some extent, there is some truth in it, in the sense that the community has now been thrust into the role of becoming the compliance police. And I want people just to think about that we have paid regulators to do their roles, and some of them do to a lesser or greater extent really try to do that. But the reality is that the prosecutions that are occurring now against coal mines and the reporting of breaches, this is overwhelmingly occurring by virtue of the public making reports, gathering information and data. And so that's a really important role that can't be denied. We find that, that citizen science is strengthening advocacy through the use of data and science. And we keep a watchful eye on them because we know that there is a motivation for them to cut corners and to save money. And so one thing about citizen science is that you don't just suddenly go, I'm going to do some science. A lot of monitoring goes on in the course of developing what inquiry am I actually doing? What information do I need to obtain? So the design of the inquiry comes on the back of a lot of monitoring. So the other point is to build an alternative narrative for public discourse about the mining impacts and to frame people away from the negative terms of protester and activist, which I think we'll all agree, these are negative terminologies designed to portray anyone who doesn't agree with the mining as a sort of a fringe dweller, a troublemaker, and so on. So the relevance of citizen science today, well, the relevance can be seen in proportion to the scale of this problem. And I mean the scale, you've seen the map. So geographically, we have a large area, and not only the size of the area, but the significance of the area. The fact that that this area is a food growing area, it's a food bowl. The fact that this is the gas fields are on the recharge zone of the Great Artesian Basin. The fact that all these coal mines are operating in the catchment area of the Namoi, which is an important tributary of the Murray-Darling Basin, and the damage that is going on in digging down into aquifers and into, hydrogeological areas that are not well understood. At a global level, as we move away from fossil fuels and the value of the resource is declining, these companies will not hesitate to break conditions or cut corners to save money. And we see one of these situations playing out right now. It's quite a scandalous situation where the coal mines are seeking approval essentially to turn their landfills into their mines into landfills for mass tire burial in this day and age. And that's just one example that we see, and that's playing out at the moment. The trust in post-approval compliance systems is very low, and coal and gas are seen as bad neighbours by many. They give selectively to numerous causes. You probably saw that recently, well, all the time, there are different news stories about the mines giving money here or there, but that doesn't manage to actually overcome the observed problems that they're causing in relation to groundwater loss of neighbours, pollution and other problems, some of which are the subject of prosecutions and numerous other regulatory action. So the outcomes that we're looking for, well, we want to help redress the asymmetry of information and promote evidence-based decision-making by regulators. We seek to validate or alternatively to challenge the mines modelling. And we did that, we believe, successfully certainly in relation to noise modelling at the Maules Creek mine. And that's an ongoing quest wherever possible. We also believe that through our pollution pathway studies that we could be able to avert the formation of heavy metal accumulation sites occurring that will result in legacy contaminated sites for future generations to have to worry about and to clean up if possible. And we call for stricter compliance standards. And look, this is something that cannot be properly addressed in today's lunchtime seminar, but it is a fact that the compliance of these mines suffers a great deal due to a number of factors. Now, it's important to just tell people who are not aware that this area was the scene of a long-running blockade called the Leard blockade. Over 400 people were arrested in trying to stop the mine. So it can't be ignored that the Leard Forest Research Node is conducting citizen science in the wake of what essentially was a direct action blockade to stop these large mines from proceeding in the Leard Forest. I can obviously show you all the 400 people who were arrested, but just to give you an example of how broad was the community and how strong were the, was the opposition, I'd like to pay a tribute to Bill Ryan, for example, who passed away last year. Bill Ryan, a World War II veteran of the Kokoda track. He was arrested at the Maules Creek coal mine, and he always said to us, I went to fight for our democracy, and I went to fight to protect our country, and I'm fighting again now, but I'm fighting on our own soil against these coal mines. We had people like a former DPP solicitor, prosecutor, Marion Rose, who locked on to the Whitehaven pump at the Namoi River. We had the traditional tree sits in the forest, basically putting themselves in the path of bulldozers at the Maules Creek mine. And so this was a highly contested kind of situation whereby the community was, there was some concern in the community that outsiders were coming in and they were going to disrupt things, and they were hippies, and there was a lot of this misinformation. And there was also a sabotage that was conducted by people and attributed to protesters and so on. But then things started to change. So before the Leard Forest Research Node had started, there had already been some citizen science conducted at the Leard, which was highly successful. This was the discovery of Tylophora linearis by the Greenpeace Threatened Species Protection Unit. Now, Tylophora linearis is a small vine, which is it's a threatened species listed by the Commonwealth, and it was omitted from the Maules Creek approval. Sorry, it was omitted from their environmental impact assessment, and it was not listed as one of the matters of national environmental significance that was at risk at the mine. And here's a picture of it. And they went out there and over 100 plants were found which had not been disclosed to the Commonwealth. Now, the result of that was that the company, they went and they had to, they then had to change their environmental assessment, and they had to undertake a program of planting this endangered plant. But the trouble is that in the end, the offsets were not fully, the offset strategy wasn't adhered to, and even one of their mine-owned areas, which does have Tylophora linearis, is threatened by a future expansion to the north anyway. So there were good outcomes from that, which was that it really did inspire people to look at evidence and do field work like that. But the negative was that we saw that it was going to be like trench warfare to ever get that science listened to or to ever get any kind of regulatory change. Nevertheless, in the early days, we were hopeful. Our first expose was atmospheric temperature readings, monitoring the temperature at the time of clearing. Now, this picture shows you what it looks like when the mine enters its clearing window, and you can see how they have devastated many hectares of the Leard State Forest. And what we knew from the biodiversity management plan was that there were some rules around the timing and procedures that they could clear. The wording was the clearing of understory and tree felling, including habitat trees, will be halted if the temperature exceeds 35 degrees. So we monitored the temperature on the clearing days, and we used a combination of handheld thermometers as close as we could get to the clearing site, which you cannot go immediately to the clearing site without trespassing. And also we monitored all the weather stations in the area very closely. Now, it happened that in the mid-February, it's very hot in Narrabri, and on the days concerned, we had no weather station showing anything less than, certainly anything less than 35, and very often 1 or 2 degrees more. We collected all those records. We made formal complaints, and we found that the process was really lacking. And it was really lacking partly because the regulator said to us, well, they've told us that it was not more than 35 degrees. And when we said, well, have you got their actual records from their weather station? And they said to us, oh, no, we can't get that. That's management information only. What? Yeah, well, this is a common problem. They did eventually manage to investigate it, and only through launching an investigation, they were able to get some information that denied that it was over 35 degrees. Well, you have to ask how it could be that every other weather station in the area was over 35 degrees. The whole region is baking hot, but only there it was under 35 degrees. And I'll leave that question with you. It's a question that we have all the time. So one of the really great things that was also done in 2014 and 2015 was that we conducted baseline surveys of the bird life and produced some reports. We had some really interesting results from the bird surveys. You know, we had, even in one morning, 82 species observed, with 6 vulnerable species under the New South Wales Threatened Species Act. All of our survey teams included at least one expert or highly experienced birder to ensure that the statistics, that the data was robust. And what we found was that citizen science in the forest performs multiple roles. It's great. It's very exciting to have experts to learn from, and it really, the other side observations that you make while doing it and the building and accumulation of knowledge and familiarity is, it is a cumulative thing. So we conducted these bird surveys, and we're planning to do a repeat of them later this year. So just letting people know, anyone wants to get involved, we are going to attempt to do a repeat of the same bird surveys that we did, and we're going to use the same, we were going to use the same locations. Except for, I'll just go back just to show you. So back then, when we did our survey, we nevertheless noticed that Boggabri Coal's Southern Rehabilitation Report was saying that already, only 2 years after the expansion of that mine, that they were reporting a low diversity of threatened woodland birds had been recorded in the rehabilitated areas. So that was already the situation, and I can tell you it's a whole lot worse now. We also did some other outreach. So, for example, we took advantage of what we were learning, and we created children's worksheets of the endangered birds of the Leard, and that was something really beautiful, extending it to children, because children can't easily be involved in some of our citizen science activities. Our plans to repeat the bird surveys, well, they've somewhat been compromised at the moment. Here you can see this was our different areas that we surveyed, or some of them on that side of the forest. But, ta-da, well, just in April, we happened to be in the forest and we see some signs have been put up, and this is the sign that's gone up. The area in red that you see here, this has now been turned into an exclusive use area for the Boggabri mine. Now, the Boggabri mine told the Community Consultative Committee, we didn't ask for it. New South Wales Forestry said, well, we've decided to create this exclusive use area because of the dangers if people venture there because of the fumes coming from the mine when they're blasting. So please, people, think about that. If that is too dangerous for the humans to go there during the, when there's blasting, how safe is it for all those animals and the threatened species that used to live there? Well, there are quite a few issues about the ongoing encroachment on the forest. And one of them, as I've put in the notes here, is one of the problems is that the analogue sites that were set up originally to be the comparison sites for rehabilitation, well, guess what? They've been taken up by mining. So they have to move the analogue sites. There's no transparency around the analogue sites, and also no transparency around the trigger action response plans. And if there's no transparency around them, then you have to really wonder how well they're being complied with at all. Today, very little animal life can be seen in the Leard Forest, and it's really sad. You go there, once upon a time, there was bird song, there were animals, there were reptiles, and so on. The picture you're looking at now was Lawler's Well. Now, Lawler's Well was a culturally significant site of the Gomeroi, as you can imagine. Thousands of artefacts were found there when they surveyed. A spring-fed waterhole in the Leard Forest. It was the only permanent water supply for the animals. Well, unfortunately, that was in the path of Whitehaven Coal's Maules Creek mine, and that has now been bulldozed. We believe actually that the water that the spring has been intercepted by the mine because water pours into the mine from that area near where that is. So that was a really sad thing that happened, and it's had an impact on the wildlife, we believe. Now, regular blasting leads to strong vibrations, particulate pollution, and in some cases, NO2 incidents, which is toxic to humans. I just wanted to give people a little bit of an idea of what it looks like when and what you're looking at actually is a double blast. You can see that there's been a blast to the left, a large one, and a smaller one over to the right. Now, that noise is not the noise of the blast, but nevertheless, I wanted to show to people to see just how severe this blasting looks from a distance of about 7 kilometres. And I'd also like to point out I think that gives you a bit of a picture of what it's like to be even 7 kilometres from a blast like that, and that's happening to you every week. It's pretty severe. This was viewed from Harperary Road, which is where the little school is. And, you know, it seems incredible that this is tolerated, that this blasting can be going on near a school, well, even near people's homes, and yet it is. And you question the birds, the bats, the koalas, what impact is it on them to have this kind of blast? And this is not just one blast a week. This is several blasts a week from multiple places. Sorry. So then the other thing that started to become apparent from the very early days of the operations of the mines was the noise disturbance from the Maules Creek mine, far beyond where the 35 decibel noise limit was supposed to be. The locals soon experienced noise from the Maules Creek mine. They were experiencing sleep disturbance, and you could actually hear distinct noises from over 8 kilometres distance. Well, you know, when the background noise levels are only about 25 decibels, that's what you get. You get noise from toots. You could hear the toot. You could hear the tractor tread slap, and you could hear rocks being dumped in the trays. And we were encouraged because we'd heard about community in Port Botany having success in analysing the noise levels from the container terminal. What had happened was that Port Botany residents had complained of sleep criteria breaches from the container terminal. The EPA set up monitoring equipment and concluded that there was no increase in noise levels. The sceptical residents asked for the raw technical data, analysed it themselves and found errors, and insisted that the EPA redo its analysis. Well, we found that really encouraging, but unfortunately, we weren't able to have that much success as the people of Port Botany. We also were encouraged by developments in citizen science that were new technology was becoming available. So there was generally a sense that we could achieve something. So we bought an entry-level acoustic monitor. It was only about $400. It validated the lived experience of what people were complaining about. And then we crowdfunded to buy a $6,000 class 1 acoustic meter that could be used. It could be, it would be more something that they would listen to more, shall we say. You needed to have that anyway to comply with the industrial noise policy. And so then we started 2 years of winter monitoring. And that was, you know, it's not for the faint-hearted doing this kind of monitoring. You're out at night, you're out on cold nights in winter, you are, you're being trailed by mine security. Sorry, I'm just trying to progress my slideshow here. So our first Leard Forest noise report in September 2015, well, we found that people were not always complaining, because sometimes there'd be one person in the family severely upset about it, the other one didn't notice it so much. Low frequency noise is like that. It can depend on your physiology, different chest cavity size, all kinds of different things can affect whether the low frequency noise is going to disturb you or not. And our report found, knowing that the true original background noise in the area was likely to have been well under 30 decibels and approaching 25 decibels, to call an increase of up to 10 to 13 decibels as a mild impact, and that of a 13 to 15 decibels as moderate, is simply untruthful, not to mention scientific. But you see, the grinding, challenges of demonstrating this continued. We spent a night in observing the mine and correlating it with noise that we were picking up with our monitors, so that we could match, for example, the sound of equipment with a particular frequency. And we also produced a number of complaints and reports. Now, I'd just like to bring attention to this slide, because this is where you really get into the nitty-gritty of the citizen science and the challenges of citizens when you are coming up against experts. So we obtained, through the Government Information Public Access, which is also known as Freedom of Information, we obtained some really interesting documents about what the experts and the bureaucrats were saying about us. So, for example, it says, I just had a phone call from X, and I believe X was me, via the environment line. X had my name from when we met with them at their request, and with the agreement of Maules Creek coal mine to discuss good acoustic practice in relation to noise monitoring. Question: why should the EPA, why should the regulator seek the agreement of Maules Creek coal mine to discuss good acoustic practice with the community? And therein we have behind the scenes discussions. That was to us improper for them to be discussing, and even the words, to seek the agreement of Maules Creek coal mine. And also, the EPA did not propose to apply an approach simply because the outcome was preferred by one group or another, but based instead on the best science available. And look, this is something we hear now from Santos, we hear from the Department of Health. We're going to choose the experts we listen to. Well, you know something, we actually had evidence. So look over to your right, because it happened that on one night we were doing noise monitoring the same night that Global Acoustics, Whitehaven Coal's consultants, were doing it. And we found extremely anomalous results. We had these results. This is the low frequency. Look how high the low frequency is. They were saying that they were under 30 decibels, and this, we couldn't even get that amount because they won't disclose it. So we were faced with us having 4 readings that we would fully disclose and hand up all of our charts and graphs. They had 2 readings, which they wouldn't disclose. Even then, they would only accept the mine's opinion. Now, this was really highly problematic at the time, and we wrote a very serious complaint to the EPA. Unfortunately, time is moving on. I don't have time to tell you the full story about that, but to suffice to say that we really challenged them as hard as we could, because what we were finding was that the noise levels that were supposed to be contained within the red line were being exceeded way, way beyond that. And yet still the Department of Planning kept insisting, despite all of the evidence, that the noise in a rural environment would only extend to 4 kilometres at the maximum decibels. So, well, Pat, shall I talk more about this noise stuff, or just give more of a flavour and deal with the noise later? Because, I mean, of course, we love our topic, but here, I'll just take that as a move on. This is an example of the kind of dust pollution that you get in the area. And when you complain, you get the answer from the mine that, oh, well, there was a big dust storm somewhere else, or the farmers are ploughing. And we've heard some ridiculous ones. We've even heard the mine complain that the forest is causing the dust, which is scientifically incorrect, because actually forests absorb dust. But there was a breakthrough. Now, this was a terrific breakthrough, that the New South Wales EPA installed a real-time camera on a private property near the Maules Creek mine. It was a terrific breakthrough because it enabled the EPA based in Armidale to actually see what was going on. Up until then, it was the community's word against Whitehaven Coal. And you've seen with the noise example how hopeless that is to try for the community to be trying to compete with Whitehaven Coal. Subsequently, that property was bought out. The real-time camera moved to the state conservation area, as it's been inoperative for the best part of the year. And now if you make a complaint about dust, well, they deny it, and then there's no evidence because the camera's not working. So that's pretty bad. But nevertheless, dust was obviously a big problem in the area. And I will add that there's a dust problem in Tamworth, which we claim needs some further analysis, because the prevailing northwesterly wind will be taking dust straight to Tamworth. And Tamworth does have a kind of horseshoe ring of mountains around it. The EPA has always responded to this with the argument that it's the wood fire smoke that's causing it. But even in summer, they claim that it's the wood fire smoke. And we believe that some kind of broader study needs to be done to see how far afield the dust from these mines is going, because there is a possibility that it's actually going and causing dust pollution at Tamworth. Basically, when we did our own dust deposition monitoring at Maules Creek, which we did after a very detailed study of the whole geography and the environmental conditions and different land ownership in the area, we found the system to be farcical. We actually replicated a system of dust deposition which is used by the mines. They're obligated to do it under the conditions, but I'll tell you right now, it measures, it's a ridiculous thing to be measuring, because all it does is measure how much dust is falling. It doesn't tell you the chemical composition of it. You don't know where the dust has come from. And it's this kind of meaningless study that needs to now be looked into, because it's actually stopping people from doing more meaningful studies that might apportion responsibility for the dust problem to a particular industry, and also studies that will actually ascertain what is the chemical composition. Now, one of the big challenges that we have, being a broad-based group, is learning to use the instruments in the field. And that takes up a lot of time. So you might have to hire an instrument for a few days just to learn to use it, and then have to postpone your material studies till later. And so that's a lot of work and a lot of time spent just doing that. Out in the field, practice runs, anemometer, cross-checking. Here we are using the dust meter, practicing using the dust meter in preparation for doing a 24-hour study at the Boggabri station. And we used that just by driving a car backwards and forwards to look at how the readings would go up and down. So learning the geography is also critical to the study design and interpretation of environmental impact assessments. At the 2018 Australian Citizen Science Association conference, Amelie van der Stok, one of our members, presented her study on foliar deposition of dust near the Maules Creek coal mine across a transect. You can see this transect that was created, and tomato seedlings were planted and they were collected, and the results of that were that basically the closer you get to the mine, the dust greatly increases. So claims from the Maules Creek coal mine that the dust is coming from elsewhere were strongly refuted by that study. So we do have a lot of mapping challenges. We have maps in different formats. We have difficulty of comparing. It's great that now GIS technology is the solution, because you can now, we now have the ability to overlay different maps of different origins. There are legal issues if you don't get your mapping right, because trespass is a serious thing. Nighttime trespass is potentially dangerous. There are people with guns out there, pig shooters, landowners trying to keep pig shooters out. And so even on some occasions, I will do a check of tenure the day before fieldwork, just to ensure that there are no changes to that. And here is a picture from our 24-hour ambient air monitoring exercise at Boggabri railway station. Fairly grueling, and we've discovered huge variations with mainly with the locomotives. The PM 2.5 emissions from the locomotives. There was one occasion where one of those locos was 2,000 times the emissions. We knew that the locomotives, the diesel emissions, were a problem, but we had no idea that they were going to be that much. So that was a learning experience. We haven't repeated it. And here we are at the Boggabri station. There was a lot of community involvement in the whole dust program, people helping set up the monitors in their homes and wanting to learn about the results. One of our really sad but important events was a biodiversity rapid assessment of the Leard travelling stock route in July 2017. And this is an issue that is playing out right now. Here we had a group of environmental science and ecology students who came along and participated in this rapid assessment. As you can see, this travelling stock route contains habitat trees. They're already marked. Here's a view of the travelling stock route before it got bulldozed. And this is critically endangered ecological community, white box grassy woodland of a high quality. It was linked to the Leard Forest until the mine got in the middle. And that is a drone view of what it looked like beforehand. We entered through an open gate. We didn't trespass. We sought approval from the Gomeroi. We informed the Gomeroi elders before we went in there, and we asked if anyone could accompany us, but it just wasn't possible on the day. We walked through an open door and we went in and we did this survey. This is now where Whitehaven wants to bury thousands of tonnes of tyres, and they're currently seeking approval from, well, they haven't applied for it yet, but because first they're trying to get landowners' consent from the Gomeroi to do that. But this is the kind of thing that we're up against the whole time. You can see in this image here, this large area, which we call an overburden dump, or well, it's the overburden, that lies where the travelling stock route used to be, which is pretty awful. Another scene where we have been doing quite a bit of work has been at the Pilliga East. And this is some footage of some of the activities going on courtesy of the Narrabri underground coal mine. Until we started investigating what's going on there, I don't think anyone had any idea of how severe the above ground footprint of an underground coal mine can be. But that's how it is when you're Whitehaven Coal and you decide that you've just got a forest that you can do what you like with on the surface. This activity that we're looking here appears to be a setting up of a degassing station. You can see quite a bit of mess there and drilling rigs and so on. This is multiplied many, many times throughout the forest, creating severe fragmentation, pollution, residue pollution, and also fugitive emissions, because you've got raw venting of gases from the coal seams. And so here's another picture from the Narrabri, from Pilliga Forest, where we've done some work. I'll just interrupt first. This is what you don't do. This is an improperly capped borehole, which we found. The company is being prosecuted. Any day now, we're going to hear what the sentence is. This is not how you take samples, but I'm showing it to you because it's one of the rare pictures that we've got of how Whitehaven left an uncapped borehole in the Pilliga Forest, and that's one of the offences that they've been charged with. And what's wrong with this whole picture here is that the samples are not in ice and the guy doesn't have a glove on and there's no preservative. I'm not showing this to you as a demonstration of good science practice. This is just an example of us having some, empty jars we thought we'll take out. We weren't really prepared, but look what we found. This is how you do it the right way. I just thought I'd show you. Bottles with preservative, packed in ice and so on. And that's how we've been doing it for our pollution pathways water testing, which we've got some pilot studies which we're planning to build on. We have discovered some accumulation sites that we've identified, and work is ongoing. More recently, one of the latest examples of citizen science is called Gaswatch. And that's been done with the Northwest Protection Advocacy Group, which is primarily a group that has been established to monitor the gas expansion. And Gaswatch, we created a booklet, a field inspection booklet, to enable members of the public to go and safely have a look at what's going on in the gas fields and how to interpret what's going on there and how to report back. And it was a collaboration between uni students and a wide range of community members. So what are some of the risks and challenges? Well, safety of researchers is paramount. This photo might look like we're taking a big risk by standing in close proximity to the blast, but what you don't see is that the car was basically right behind us, because we know that NO2 fumes can cause permanent harm, and we take our own safety very carefully, very seriously, because our reputational risk would be too great if people got injured, or if we do any kind of unlawful activity or reckless appearing activity. Other risks and challenges, well, there's harassment by mine security. And also previously, we did used to be harassed by police. And I will point out that we no longer are harassed by police. And the mines did try to they tried to defame people. They tried to allege to the police that people were doing illegal activities. After crying wolf one too many times, the police actually stopped listening to Whitehaven Coal, which was great. And trust building is one of the really important things that you need to do when you're involved in citizen science. Here we have pictures of what it's like. It is a bit dangerous, I will say. There have been some moments where they have really acted irresponsibly, the security. Here they are in the video tailing us when we're just going about our lawful business. They seem to think that's okay. And I'd just like to point out to people before I close that one of our important sources of information and monitoring is by air and not by drone, because the Maules Creek mine, we cannot view them by drone, partly due to it's not legal to, unless you're licensed, to have a drone outside of your it has to be within your eyesight. But flights like this are really, really valuable, and we do these regularly. So this is a view of the Maules Creek mine, and it's these kind of flights that have really been so important in informing us about what's going on behind closed doors, shall we say. And here I've got a message from one of our beautiful members.
Hi, my name is Maria. We're in the Pilliga Forest at the moment, and I'm a volunteer for the Leard Forest Research Node, and I encourage others, if possible, if you could join us, because citizen science is going to be extremely important in the future, ensuring that mining companies are kept accountable and to ensure that they comply with the regulations and the terms and conditions of their operations. That's really
so. And I would like to thank you. That ends my presentation.
Thank you so much, Anna. What a fantastic presentation and such important work. We did have a few questions in the chat that I was monitoring throughout your presentation, and maybe we'll just jump straight into those. But for others, if you do have a question for Anna, feel free to pop it into the chat. You're getting a lot of praise there, Anna, as well. And then also, if you'd like to ask Anna directly your question, just raise your hand using the reactions button in the Zoom. But one question we did have from Debbie is whether or not you're collaborating with other citizen science initiatives in dealing with similar issues, whether that be across Australia or across the world, dealing with issues around mining.
Not yet. I have myself been reading the literature mainly from Canada and the US on how citizens have been doing monitoring of shale gas activities. I would definitely like to go in that direction. We, particularly where there's a crossover with gas, that is going to be an increasing part of our work. As the coal mines start, like the coal mines are trying to expand, but the global economic forces are prevailing against them. So you've got the Vickery mine, which it got approved ages ago, could have already started ages ago. They don't have finance. We now are concerned about the gas and the fugitive emissions. I'd love to talk to anyone who can, we can talk about, for example, doing imaging of methane emissions. That's going to be really important. And also we have some interesting work going on in relation to soil degradation related to the runoff from, well, not runoff, dumping of salts from coal seam gas produced water. So please get in touch with me, Debbie, if there's some sort of congruence between your work and ours.
Thank you, Anna, for answering. And no, I was just reminded of an environmental justice network that I've seen ones where there were many citizen science projects around pollution created by mines. So I will put it in the chat if I can find it again.
Thank you very much.
Anna, we have a question from Doro. What chance is there to stop Santos by applying citizen science, given breaches are not given serious consideration or are hard to prove?
Well, you can see that even when we've had proof that it was not possible in some cases to effectively counterbalance what the mines were saying. And I think that stopping the gas fields due to citizen science, I don't know whether that's going to happen, but possibly influencing decision makers that will indirectly stop the advancement, that could have some impact. I mean, we've got a situation at the moment where there has been no health impact assessment done for the Narrabri gas project. And despite this, they've now announced, Josh Barilaro, he's the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, announced that they're opening up new areas for gas exploration before they've even got baseline data for the hydrogeology of the Narrabri gas project. There's no health impact assessment. What we would really like to do would be it's a matter of adding weight to the body of opinion and creating credibility for information that is coming from other sources other than universities and professional consultants. Because, by the way, there's really big issues at the moment with the credibility of the professional science, because there is a group called the Gas Industry Social and Environmental Research Alliance, or JAZERA, seems to have done most of the publishing on the impacts of gas in Queensland, but highly criticised due to the design of their investigations, like, the recent study where they published and said that that fracking is safe on the basis of, I think it was 6 or 10 gas wells that were handpicked on a particular property, when there's like 60,000 gas wells, or like, not 60, there's probably about 30,000 gas wells. And so it was poorly designed and really didn't look good. And you start to say, well, okay, you're comparing citizen science with professional science, but actually the professional science isn't stacking up that great either. So Doro, it's yet to be seen how much influence citizen science can have. But if that is playing into the level of social license, then it's influential, if not probative. That's conservative. I'd like to think that it's going to be more than that. I mean, of course, we can also gather evidence that can lead to a prosecution. But to give the example from the Narrabri Underground, yes, we did gather evidence. Yes, we did provide that evidence to the regulator. It was a long haul trying to actually get the regulator at the time to listen. But eventually we struck gold. And I would like to give a shout out to the resources regulator and to just talk a little bit about the culture that they have there, which is that we know that they have an investigative culture. They are, some of them recruited from police, and so they're not professionals trying to protect their patch and to protect their scientific reputation or whatever. They're actually there to investigate. And what we would like to see is more of a culture of that real investigation. You're not there to partner with the mine. You're there to regulate the mine. And that is something that the regulators have forgotten.
Thank you, Anna. And with your relationship with the resources regulator, has that evolved over time to a more positive relationship? Did it begin in a more, were they interested in the work that you were doing in the beginning?
Not in the beginning. No, in the beginning, we're just pests. In the beginning, it's a kind of I guess we had a couple of, we went to Maitland to meet with the mines inspector to talk about a few things. We polite, he was courteous. Then when the time came to make a complaint about what was going on in the Pilliga East, about the what looked to be some very messy polluting activities, uncapped wells, clearing and all this, it took him ages to investigate it. He came and investigated it, and it amounted to nothing. So later what happened was that the case was transferred to another department, and that's when we started to be treated with a little bit of respect. And, you know, it was clear that we were not fabricating this evidence. You know, it was clear we had GPS locations, we had photos with date stamped photos, we had witnesses, we had really, to fabricate that evidence would have been like far more work than actually doing the study. And we were lucky that, as I say, that the tenacious culture of the resources regulator in relation to upholding their role came to the fore. Yeah, so that was good.
And Anna, if there is people here in a similar position to you who are working to address some of the concerns that they have in their communities and are wanting to build those relationships with the regulator or other stakeholders, what recommendations would you have for them, and what's worked for you, and what are some of the challenges that you've faced in building those relationships?
Yeah, one of the first things that I would say is not to become a serial pest of actually complaining about everything too lightly before you really know what's going on. I mean, it's one thing to make a complaint to the environment line, and everyone is at liberty to do that and should do that. Although it is a bit of a deterrent when you make complaints over and over again and then nothing happens. But when it comes to actually sending what you might call evidence to the regulators, I think that it's really wise to make sure that your wording is scientific, that you are evidence-based, and the tone is important. You might say it shouldn't be important, but somehow emotion does seem to balance against science and evidence. So keep it as much as you can on that kind of level. That's one bit of advice that I would give. I think it's really important to have conversations. It's hard to do this work on your own. I think it's pretty much impossible. So I'm hoping that my colleague Tom is here. I don't know if Tom Mullaney is part of the group. I'd love him to chime in and add any more on answering that question. Is Tom listening in today, Pat?
I can't see him, Anna. No.
Oh, he probably had a technical difficulty. He's old school.
I see Kobe has been active in the chat, and I just would like to invite Kobe if she'd like to ask Anna a question or to make a comment.
Sure, I'll wave and say hello.
Hi.
There's so many things. It's such a fascinating, like it's a devastating project, and it's also just on so many layers. There's so many layers to it that I just don't even know which question to prioritize. Hence I've been sharing some thoughts in the chat. So I'm going to share one that I was just starting to draft. I guess it happened to be now, although I'm not sure if I would love to know how. I know that Linda's still on the call, for example. So I just shared a question about whether Gamilaroi Next Generation's been involved in citizen science, which you might want to speak to, because there's different. I know that media studies people might not be able to include some of those works within, for example, how they're analysing such a project as a researcher. But also it's one of those ones that I find really hard to do with as a researcher, because it's just so laden with just layers of impacts on people and different species. Some of the work on sensationalism comes to mind for me, by, for example, Professor Rosabelle Boswell, who's from Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, but now lives in South Africa and writes about the sensationalism from a perspective of people with lived experiences. So thanks for sharing. And I really wanted to, I'd love to hear, and what I liked, Anna, is that you did show some of those sensations, and that's some of the evidence that you're talking about, how capturing those videos and things can be stronger evidence because it's hard to deny them. So I guess I have too many thoughts.
Well, I'll just
to articulate a useful question.
Okay. Humilere Next Generation is a more recently formed group. We do have regular contact with the Gomeroi. We did have Gomeroi representatives at our Gas Watch workshop that was conducted in December, and it was actually at that workshop that one of our Gomeroi they are the traditional owners, suggested, well, why can't we have a Gomeroi citizen science event? And as a matter of fact, that is something that myself and a couple of others are currently working on to try and further, to actually have a celebration of Gomeroi science. It's like, we're not saying, come on, Gomeroi, come and do this kind of science. We're saying, you know what? Your culture has your own science. Let's learn about your science. And so we're in the early days of scoping what this might be like, to have an event like that and have it on country and have something that is sorely and really desperately needed, is to have a deep listening on country kind of event where Gomeroi scientists, because we have had one Gomeroi scientist, Crystal DiNapoli, who's quite a well-known astronomer, has come along to one of our field trips and gave a talk. So it is something that we always think about and how we can do it better. And so hopefully I'll be able to announce later in the year that there will be a Gomeroi science event in the Pilliga.
That sounds sensational in the positive senses of the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess thinking about this EMCR group for the Australian Citizen Science Association, and also some support from the Academy of Science towards some grants and things, I think it's the idea. I'm interested in unpacking the separateness of it and what that means for young people who are coming up through, or who are considering whether they even want to be in the academy, and how, given when there are these really complex dynamics, both in the landscape and in communities, how can people feel safe to represent as a researcher, as well as somebody who has various layers of responsibility to a landscape and a community, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I know, but it's something that when I discussed it with Pat and Yayla when we were talking about doing this workshop, is that no one objects to citizen science. It is a very unifying force. You know, even people who are pro the mine, no one objects to it. The only person who objects to it is the mine. And as I said, they used to go and complain to the police, and sooner or later, the police just went, oh, look, you're just crying wolf. These people aren't doing anything illegal. And so, yeah, look, I think it's a terrific way forward because it validates people's lived experience. And that is really important, because the alternative is what we now know as gaslighting. It's like, we're effing you over, but we're going to deny we're doing it. And you can keep complaining all you like, and we know it's really happening, but you can keep complaining all you like. And so that's my answer to that, is that it is not a shield of armor, but it's certainly protective.
Thanks, Anna. We have, a few minutes left before we wrap up today's seminar. I just wanted to invite people to ask a question or to make a comment, for those of you who have not yet said anything today. Otherwise, we can go back to some questions that I've got here.
Everyone, hi Anna.
Hi, Leila.
Thank you so much for such a great conversation. If there are anyone from the community that is joining us today, and I think I saw some, chat from people that have experiences from being from those communities. We'd love also to hear maybe your perspectives.
Very much so.
Anna, maybe you can point to some of the people or ask if.
Well, I'm looking here and I can see, for example, I can see Linda is online, and Linda is a representative of the Gomeroi community. We've also got online Roger. Roger attended one of the Gas Watch workshops. So I can't see who else is around, but by all means, I'd love to hear from you. I can't tell who's listening. I can just see some of the names. Is Libby there? No. Okay. But look, it has really engaged a wide range of community, from landowners, residents in town, and there are teachers getting involved. I mean, with the bird surveys, we engaged the Tamworth birders and the Narrabri bushwalkers. So there are people who are not activists, but they are community members who have concerns, and they'll get involved in citizen science, but they would never go and hold a banner or, block a road or do anything like that. And, everyone needs to have a voice. And so I think that that's another one of the great things that science has achieved. I mean, one of our biggest problems is funding, because we're at the stage now where hopefully we are going to be able to get some funding to continue our pollution pathways research. We've been very, very lucky to get some funding from a private donor who doesn't wish to be named. And our seed funding originally came from local farmers who recognised that what we were doing was going to be just helpful, because we were able to provide evidence that, as it turned out, did validate people's lived experience.
And where to next, Anna? Where to from here? What does the next 6 months look like for your work?
We have got we've got samples that have been taken in various places, and our next step is to try and engage with people with the skills that we lack. So we don't have the higher order environmental science skills to actually properly analyse some of the material that we've got. And I'm hoping that in the next 6 months, that's the next step that we'll be taking. We've got samples from the Pilliga Forest, we've got samples from the whole Namoi Valley, we've even been up to Queensland, and we do have some very interesting insights up there. I'd like to point out as well that it's not just the science, it's the monitoring that makes all the difference. I mean, a group of community members went up to Queensland in March 2018, and we went to Fairview, which is Santos's big gas field, huge gas field near Roma. We witnessed a gas well that was leaking. It was visibly leaking. We recorded it on high definition video. We made a complaint. Now, we don't know the actual causation, but I'll tell you what, that complaint has set in train a sequence of events that has culminated in 10 gas wells being basically shut down in that area. So to the person who asked earlier, is like, can you actually have an effect? I think you can. I think they're indirect, and we're really looking at that now, because the legacy pollution issues in Queensland are just a foretaste of what will happen in New South Wales, and that's why we're very interested in studying Queensland. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. And it's just such an interesting example of citizen science today. Usually we have citizen science programs, or the most common form of citizen science today is those that are sort of sponsored by research institutions and involves volunteers in data collection, and that's about it. But here we have a project that is entirely community-led, and it's working towards a particular issue of community interest and concern, of great concern. And it's great to see the project that you're running, Anna, having doing such having such an impact, not only for addressing some of these problems, but also for connecting communities, and with agencies and with others as well. So thanks for your work. We really appreciate you presenting today. And I'd just like to thank everyone else for coming today too. I think it's we could probably wrap up today's seminar, unless there's any other burning questions that people might have. So
if I could just ask if I could capture all the questions and then I can reply to people.
Of course, yes.
I'd be happy to do that. I'm not sure how to do that though. Is it possible to print out the chat?
I think once the recording's finished, we can, there's also a transcript that comes with that.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
But Anna, if you press on the chat button, on the chat on the bottom right, you see there's an icon that looks like a piece of paper.
Save chat.
If you press on that, then you can save it to your computer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yayla. Yayla, did you have anything else to add?
No, just to thank everyone who came today, and thank you, Anna, for such a impactful and inspiring talk. And also just to invite everyone, we have this seminar once a month. It's always on the first Thursday of the month, so that should make it easier for you to remember. And we also have a mailing list, so you can add yourself to the mailing list and get updates every month about what we're doing and any other activities as part of this working group. We have an easy link to just put in the chat for how to register. I think it's on the AXA website. I'll just find it really quickly and put it on the chat.
I'd really like to thank you so much for the opportunity for me to showcase our work. And you can see from the photos, there's a lot of people being involved in this work. And thank you so much for all of the people who attended. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Anna. And will you be presenting at the Citizen Science Conference later?
Unfortunately, I missed the deadline, so I won't be able to. I will be attending, but I won't be able to present.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks everyone. And we look forward to seeing you again next month for a presenter yet to be determined, but we'll let you know in due course. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.